Well, not much to do, but I got a old spare starter motor from a Stag, so I thought, yeah, let me try and dismantle it. This one was actually sitting in a bucket of water many years ago, and it had seized up. So I'm actually needing some assistance. I know how basically this is the solenoid that came off. Okay. The interesting thing is on this particular starter motor, and I'm not sure if it's been modded, if it's been touched before. I think someone's had it open. But what I noticed is these nuts that go on here are not standard. They're actually metric, which is interesting. And even the nuts that hold the solenoid on are metric as well. So that's something interesting. I undid the two bolts, big bolts that go through to hold the things together, and so far I've managed to separate this part so far. But what had happened, since it was sitting in a bucket of water, uh, the so how this works, basically solenoid gets energized, and I know people have issues with their solenoid or their starter motor giving a nice click. Well, actually what actually happens is when you energize your starter motor, it basically, sorry about that, makes a connection and energizes this solenoid. And this solenoid, as you can see if I move out, gets pulled in and does two things. It moves a lever inside the starter motor itself. Bring that out. It's connected to a lever in there. And what that does is when it starts, this gear slides on the shaft. But as I said, this one's seized up, so it won't slide, but it basically engages with your flywheel. The other thing that happens is that when your starter motor fails, people get this click, 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 click. It's most likely your solenoid is clicking, but what typically happens is you this is the supply from the battery. It connects to this side of the solenoid that goes into the starter motor, and you get this click, 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 and it's not working. What actually happens is, I'm not going to open this one up because I think someone's already looked at it and I don't know if it works, but there's basically a bar that goes between these two terminals, and as you energize the solenoid, this this engages in this direction, and that bar actually makes a contact between this terminal and this terminal, and that's what energizes the starter motor. Now so some people do open this and they take that bar out. I've actually, on my purple Stag, I did actually remove the bar, cleaned it up, put it back, and I do have a relay that helps with the starter, but it's the original, I think it's the original starter motor I've got with the car. It's an original Stag starter motor. Anyway, my yellow Stag actually has a uprated high torque one, because I got that for $100 on a clearance, so I didn't bother having this one rebuilt. Now if your starter motor does you fail, you can basically, since let's put this starter motor how it should be. This is basically the solenoid engages on this, and that, in this particular case, this ends on here. If your starter motor fails, what you can do is you can bridge or get a screwdriver, because this line actually comes from your battery. It's going to be the thick wire that's coming directly from the battery. Let me just put that there. You could potentially bridge these two like this with a screwdriver, and you want to be careful. And if your car or the engine turns over, then the problem is within your solenoid in the starter motor. So let's walk through this again. This big connection goes to the battery terminal positive, and this goes the other side. So you could, as I said, bridge this. You want to be super careful underneath that. If you're under the car, you don't want it to be in gear or whatever. You want to be super careful. Just touch these two, and if the engine ticks over, you know the solenoid has a problem. This to energize the solenoid, it's this connection here. This one is the bypass. You know, when you have that 12 volts, when you energize the solenoid, the starter motor, this becomes 12 volts and provides 12 volts to the coil. As soon as the car started and you switch, you don't need this, the starter motor's not spinning anymore, this disconnects. But basically inside that bar, it also makes contact with this, and that's that wire that goes to the ballast resistor from that side, as it bypasses the ballast resistor. And this is the actual ignition. This solenoid, I've got a power supply, but it doesn't have enough current to energize that solenoid. But as I said, this basically, once it gets energized, you can hear this click, it goes in, and it'll move a lever inside the starter motor, and that pushes this gear into the flywheel. But as I said, this is C-start. Now, if somebody can give me some assistance, because I am a bit stumped, I'm assuming if I can get that free, will these two parts separate, which I am hoping. And another issue I'm having, I want to know, the end rubber cap came off relatively easily. The book ROM mentioned something about a fiber washer, but I can't see anything on there. It just looks like a metal washer. I'm just wondering if anyone knows. I'm under the impression this was looked at before based on the solenoid, these things, but someone probably can give me some advice on that. But anyway, if you have any clues on how to separate this, I'm assuming I have to disconnect this. But the next question is, how does that come off this thing here? This is rolling, but I wonder how to get that off. So, questions for the audience. If you want to comment, please do. Thanks. Bye. Alright, this is a continuation of my starter motor dismantling. A couple of things that, you know, you don't read the manual. But yesterday when I was messing around with this, I had a couple of issues. I couldn't separate the two halves. And as you can see, I was able to separate them, and I'll explain what I did. So there's this thing here, which is the Bendix part. And by the way, this is actually free now. It was seized on the end of this, but as the motor spins, this comes out, and you know, the solenoid basically energizes this, pushes this out, and it engages with the flywheel on the car. And you know, if you have an auto, it's a flex plate, that's what they call it. Then you need to actually take this pin out. The pin fell on the floor. You need to pull the pin out, and so that actually releases the top cover. So that was my stupid thing that I didn't do. I thought there was something going on this morning when I realized that, yeah, why can't I separate it? And basically the pin that goes through the cover stops this thing coming out from the front. Now, I still had an issue at the back end, and people on the SLC forum said basically you just take the cover off. But what I noticed is this is the washer that came off the end of my one, and it's too tight. It was actually stuck on there, and I couldn't figure out. Used the hammer to push it, but I thought I'll snap. I put the thing in a press, and I noticed this starting to deflect a little bit. Apparently this is the end cover, but there's a bush in there. It looks like a brass bush that it rubs against, but I did notice a little bit of deflection, so I stopped. And then got my torch out, which is a blowtorch, and I applied a little bit of heat and more penetrating oil, and then applied a little hammer, and it just fine because it did come off. But as you can see, this thing it doesn't want to go on, but this came off. It was very, very tight. It eventually did come off. There's this thing here, this part of the windings of it. I don't know what this does, but obviously it's all corroded, so this probably ain't gonna work ever again. This is the contact. So people say to clean up the contacts on the end of this. You can see they're pretty crappy. Let me put on my gloves. I don't want to get my hands too dirty. This eventually does come out, and you can see the contacts, electrical contacts rub on that. It is pretty shitty in there. This is probably scrap anyway, but I was just curious how to pull it apart. Let's put that back in there. If it wasn't for this, I would probably make a note which is the front and which is the back, because I can't really tell, to be honest. Probably there is some markings. And then this is where the starter motor contacts. You can see here there's a bit of spring-loadedness on that, where the contacts are made. This one is stuck, that one's stuck. This actually was sitting in a bucket, and I think it got outside in my backyard, and I think what happened, water got into the bucket. This one's stuck as well, but there is something here which I'm not sure of. This something here, but I'm not sure if this connects to that or what's going on there. But you know, as I said, this is a scrap unit. I thought I'd just disassemble. This thing is riveted on 2 rivets on either side. As I said, this looks like a bush, not a bearing at the end of that. And this actually, obviously it's not sitting this way, but sits the other way, but it just rubs on, sits on the end of the thing this way, obviously. But just wanted to show you what was going on. So yeah, that's it. This thing in the manual, there's a document on how to remove this and how to apply it on. Don't use oil or grease on there, but basically use a collar, and you've got to whack this off on the top edge, and then I think you pull something off, and then when you put it back, use a graphite seal. You don't want to put grease because it gets greasy and bunged up. But this is the Bendix part that's actually working. And so anyway, I have a couple of other starter motors in various stages, so maybe, you know, at some point I might get one fixed, or, you know, last time I got a great deal on a high torque starter for $100 from a place that was just getting rid of them. Should have bought another one, but doesn't matter. They're, in US they're about $270 for a high torque one, so I might just get one of those. So yeah, that's my bit on dismantling a starter motor. So I just thought, this is the front cover. This is like a seal on that. It's pretty stuff. It basically keeps the crap out of the starter motor. Here's the setup with the solenoid connected to the starter part of the motor, and as I said, I've put the solenoid on that lever, and I'm going to reinsert it in there, and that's how it all goes. So as I said, that's on the bench. Put this back in there as is, and then I will put the end cap, the body on, and then the end cap. Oh, sorry. And also on the end here, it's just a bush as well, so it's not really a bearing or anything. It just rotates on this. So I suppose, you know, when you're putting it back together, you could apply some lubrication or something on that. Okay, this is one bit on the video on my starter motor dismantling. As I said, this one was probably ain't going to be working, but I just wanted to dismantle it. I mentioned earlier about the solenoid, that you can actually open this up, and I'm assuming under here these 2 wax seals is 2 screws. I have actually taken a solenoid apart. That's on my purple car, and cleaned it up, and it's still using the same starter motor with a relay, and it's been working for about 15-20 years or so. Now if you're going to do your starter motor, and you do have a click start, what I don't recommend you do is pull the solenoid off the body, because as you can see here, while I was messing around with it, dismantling it, I took this off, but it's going to be super difficult to put this solenoid, this bit of the end of the solenoid on that lever in there. So I'm assuming what you need to do is, as you have the starter motor separated, the front cover at least, connect the solenoid first, then try and wiggle the pin, or that lever, or lever as they say in America, onto the end of this thing, and then attach it. So since I have the two halves together now, it's going to be more or less impossible for me to get this thing back on there without physically dismantling the complete starter motor. So this is just something to be aware of if you are going to be attempting to mess around with the solenoid. Just leave it on there, or else if you do dismantle it, you may have to dismantle the complete starter motor to get this back on. I just put it back together. This is actually a bush here, which I have gathered. It's not a bearing. And on the front there's also another bush as well. I just lubricated those. This washer was on top of this, and as I said, this, if you notice, I'm assuming it would have gone on pretty easily, but it's pretty tight, and that was what was preventing me pulling this apart. And then there's a star washer. There's a washer that had come off that was on the end of that. What I noticed when I took this apart, the end of the shaft is pretty small, so you may want to replace it. Then don't forget, there is so here you go. This was at the end of this thing. As you can see, it does want to, it will go on, but it fell off. And then there's a dust cap, a rubber plug dust cap. Don't lose that. I'm assuming that's goes on the end of the whole thing. End of the whole thing to keep the grease in there and stop dirt getting in there. But anyway, this is a bit on the starter motor. As I said, this one's probably scrap, but I'll still keep it. Usually the solenoid of the starter motor fails, but I do have a couple of other starter motors, so I'll use it as spares.